thank you all for taking some time out of your day to come to this session. And my name is Eric Silberberg. I'm a librarian at Queens College, which is part of the City University of New York. And I'm going to be talking today about a project that I've been working on for the past few months. And the name of this talk that I prepared about the project is called Build Your Own AI Tool, Scripting with Google's PaLM and Python for Libraries. If at any point there's something that I say, you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and drop it in the chat. And Gabrielle, our moderator, will stop me and we'll take a look and see if the question is best answered right then and there, or we'll talk about it at the end. So, yes, we did. Thanks again to San Jose State for organizing this, and as well as to Future of AI. And so what I'm going to share today is the process that went into a project that I've been working on at Queens College associated with this problem. So I am the subject liaison for the School of Education. And I saw that we had pretty low participation among the School of Education faculty to self-deposit in the institutional repository. And so what I'm going to explain over the next 15, 20 minutes is how this problem led me to adopt Google's PaLM API to facilitate and support the faculty in the School of Education to make it easier for them to self-deposit in our institutional repository. So I'm going to sort of tell the story about my trial and error process to get this started. And then I'm going to share with you the script that I eventually wrote that helped them with this process. My hope for today is that by sharing with you this problem-solving process and my script, that you can apply it to similar or even not so similar problems that might benefit from using PaLM or any one of the other AI APIs that are available right now. So as before I begin, also, if you have at least a cursory background in Python, you'd be more than able to understand what we're talking about today. And if you're not, and you're just interested, I hope that also that this inspires you to want to learn more. So why was it important to me to have the faculty deposit in our institutional repository? Well, first and foremost, it's something that's personal to me in terms of my past work history and my own approach to librarianship, that making the research that, especially in education, open access is something that I believe very strongly in. Second of all, it also aligns with the university mission of the City University of New York, where I work, in that as a public university, the work of a public university should be available to the public. And lastly, from my own background as a classroom teacher as well, you know, I really strongly believe that education research should be open and available, because ultimately the point of doing education research is to put it in the hands of state, federal, and local policymakers, and also in the hands of school admin and teachers. So this is sort of how my thinking started. The faculty were very, not reluctant, but I think just wasn't really on their radar that they can be depositing their articles in their institutional repository. For those of you that might not be so familiar with that, many colleges and universities have a repository where researchers can deposit their articles to make them more available online. And the point of having a repository like this is to, on the one hand, satisfy funding requirements, especially getting funding in education from the federal or state departments of education, that any research that results from this sort of funding will be made publicly available. So my thinking was that perhaps faculty are not putting their articles in our repository because the whole ecosystem about what are the open access policies for each journal are at best very complicated. And so I was thinking, well, if I were to empower the faculty by sort of making it very easy for them to know what is the OA policy for each one of their articles, that this sort of information would empower them to deposit and would make the process a lot easier. So the way that you can look up the policies for each article is through a website that's called Silberberg. And this is a database that by entering in the journal title will spit out the open access policies around for that journal. This can be a bit of a monotonous process to have to search article by article, especially some faculty have, over 50, 60 published papers. Yeah, it's a time-consuming process. So here's what I was thinking and how it would work in an automated system. I would have the list of their citations, and then from those citations, I would need to be able to extract the journal name. And then once I have the journal name, I would be able to use Silberberg's API, meaning to just send them, automate sending them the journal name. And then Silberberg would give back to me the open access policy for that journal. But the stumbling block in this automation process was how to efficiently take out the journal names from the citation. I was not interested in sitting there and reading through hundreds of citations and manually pulling out the journal name. This whole thing was supposed to be a fast process for both me and the faculty. So this is what I started out by doing. I would code for the rules of APA format. So if you look on the top, for example, 1, I started to use the rules of APA format to have Python understand where to look for the journal name and then give that to me, if we're thinking about it in a spreadsheet, to give me the journal, citation in column 1, and then in column 2 to give me the journal name. So I was, writing rules being like, after you have, here, I'll draw in here. After you have sort of this combination of a 4-digit year surrounded by parentheses in a period, then jump to the next period. And after that, you will find the journal name, and you should stop reading when you get to that comma after the journal name. And that's wonderful if the faculty were all following APA format. Some faculty are a little bit more creative, like in example 2. Again, we have that 4-digit year. We go to that second period, and then you see we have African Journal Teacher Education, but we have a period. We have the instead of a volume, we're given the month, season it was published. So this really started to create a list of a ton of exceptions that I was starting to code for, and it got very annoying, quite honestly. So I actually put the project on ice for a little while. Let me get rid of my annotations here. And around that time, I started to, this would have been earlier last year, I heard that Google was opening up the API that they were calling PaLM for their LLMs. And so PaLM is what is behind the chat feature of Bard, which is now Gemini. And they opened up as beta, and I signed up, and I started to tool around with it and see what it was all about. And I found that it was actually really, really good at picking out the journal name with a very simple prompt, as simple as you can see on the screen, the prompt I was using was, what is the name of the journal in this citation? And the output was perfectly the African Journal Teacher Education, and it didn't include the winter, spring, or anything else like that. So that got me thinking, oh, perhaps instead of trying to code for the rules in citations, I could just kind of use the AI as a shortcut to get out the journal names. Now we're going to take a little bit a look at the code. And most of it, I would say 95% of this is boilerplate that Google makes available on the PaLM documentation online. So I split up the code into two parts, A and B. We're going to just take a closer look at A and B. Part A is how you connect the PaLM and set up the model that you're going to be using. And then in part B is how I use it in Python in a function to automate through a list of 50 citations to get the journal names. So this is part A. So it's really just 3 parts, and this again comes directly from Google. So the first thing you do is you connect with PaLM's API key you can get for free. And then that second part there is where we are iterating through all the different models that PaLM has for one that does text generation. There's other models that does, sort of image manipulation and that sort of stuff. But we just need something that can work with text. And at the end, we just select the model that we want, which is the first text generation model that Google makes freely available. And then once I've sort of initialized the PaLM API and selected the text generation model, I can then apply that into a neat little function in just a few lines of code. So I create a function that I call getJournalName, and I set up a prompt. And you can see that above in the formatted string. What is the name of the journal in the citation? And then I use the formatted string to iterate through all the citations in a spreadsheet, plugging it into the prompt as we go. Next, I apply the text model that we set up in part A. The really interesting part to me was this idea of temperature. And temperature is what they refer to the level of randomness in the output. They call it the creativity. I'll leave that to another panel to talk about the ontological significance of that, but it's essentially the level of randomness that you will get back in the response. We set that to 0 because what we're asking for is pretty black and white. We just want the name of the journal that's contained in the APA citation. And then at the end, you set the output tokens, which is essentially the word length. So even 800 is probably way too long for what we need. Probably could have been fine with 50 or 100. And then it returns completion.result, and that's the output text. So my process transformed into this. I have a list of citations in a spreadsheet. We then feed those citations to Google PaLM to get the journal name, and that will populate column B with all the journal names. Then the second direct that, into column B, and then from there, send that to Sherpa Romeo, and all in the same script, and then Sherpa Romeo will then return the OA policies. So putting it all together, this is what the script does. It lists the site. So first, it lists citations in a column named citation in the spreadsheet. 2, I read the citations using pandas. 3, I use that get journal name function that we took a look at that uses Google PaLM to isolate the journal names. Then 4 is a function called, that function creates a new column called journal name. Step 5, another function comes in called build OA policy dictionary, which uses the Sherpa Romeo API to look up each journal's OA policies. And then 6 is output a report that lists the OA fees, embargo period, acceptable depositing locations, and other conditions of the journal's OA policies per citation. And it's that output report that I share with the faculty. So here's an example of one. So you see on the top, it says citation 4. Okay, and then here it gives you the citation. Here's the journal that's extracted from that site. It's cut off because it's just a screenshot. So it then gives you the journal, and then it gives you for, not to go too much in the weeds about OA, if you're not so familiar with it, but essentially there's different versions of an article that you are permitted to deposit in an institutional repository. So it gives you the policies for the submitted manuscript, probably all better known as the preprint. And then it tells you about the accepted manuscript, and it gives you the rules there, and so on and so forth with the final version of record. And that is sort of where I am in the project now, which is I'm about to share this. Now that I've gotten sort of the script to work, I'm going to be sharing this with faculty to see if it actually encourages them to want to deposit. And with this sort of information, it speeds up the process for them. And so with that, I will share the GitHub so you can take a look at the script yourself. We only looked at the first function that uses Google PaLM. You're welcome to take a look at the other half and how it kind of deals with the craziness from Sherpa Romeo's API and then creates a report. And I'm also happy if you want to get in touch after today to share something. My email is there for you as well. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions or comments that we have here.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, we do have a couple in the chat.
Okay, good.
Our first one was from Valerie. She's wanting to know if there is a template that they might be able to mess with.
So pretty much most of what I showed today came from Google's documentation. So if you go to the Google PaLM documentation, they have a quick start, and there you can start tooling around. And you're also welcome to use my script as well if you want to fool around with that.
Great. Next one is from Nicole. How are you receiving the citations from faculty? An online form?
Sorry, how am I what?
How are you receiving citations from the faculty? Is it an online form?
No, well, right now I've just been working with Natalie Swamba, who's a really incredible person in the School of Education. He agreed to be the guinea pig for the project, and I chose him honestly because he's published widely in Africa, and so he has a lot of actually open access articles already. So I thought he'd be a great place to start. So no, my thinking is to kind of almost do this on a case-by-case, on a one-on-one basis to start, because it still is, it's still a process, so, but no, I'm not, once I do it, I think with a few people, I have to see, first of all, I have to see how Natalie's responds to this and see if he likes it or not, and then I'll adapt it from there based on his feedback as, the person who's receiving the report. How does it make him, what does he think? Does he find it easier? That sort of information would be really interesting to me now that sort of this part has been done.
Sean is asking if it responded okay to abbreviated journal names.
Yeah, that's a really cool part. It recognizes them. In education, that's not so common, as in like, the sciences, but it does recognize them. It's actually really, I don't have a figure, but, sort of anecdotally, it's like 99% accurate in identifying journal names, even if they're the common abbreviations.
Margaret wrote in the chat box, I imagine, I don't code either, You could then create a script to enter the content into the repository. So then you simply ask faculty to send their CVs and give permission to upload their OA publications.
Oh, that'd be really cool. That would be really cool. It would kind of just do it all for you, huh? I mean, something I was, yeah. I don't know. I don't know much about the. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Something I've been thinking about though is it would be cool to sort of, I think one stumbling block that my colleagues have shared is, the journals that are not truly open access, and they're forced to deposit the accepted manuscript, are annoyed by having to upload or search through their files to find the final version, or they have to go back to the journal portal and look up the accepted text. But I think it's, I'll say, be kind of cool to just take the reverse engineer the version of record and turn it back into a Word document from the final formatted, pretty PDF. And so you just kind of take the text out and dump it into a Word document and then upload that so the faculty doesn't have to worry about like, oh, which version 2 of the article was it, because they have so many versions of it in their files and whatnot. But I have not really played around with that. And I think actually in my limited experience coding around with PDFs is that it's actually really hard and not very reliable, especially if you get like charts and stuff like that.
Thank you. Dennis is wondering, how did you decide to use Sherpa Romeo for OA policy checking instead of, say, OpenAlex?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't fooled around with OpenAlex. I used the Sherpa Romeo API in the past. And that's why I did. I'd be curious. Let me know if you think OpenAlex is more comprehensive or if they have an easier API. Because I will say one thing with the Sherpa Romeo API, the information you get back is nested in a really kind of gross way. So it was actually quite hard using for a number of reasons, Sherpa Romeo's API. For example, if Sherpa Romeo didn't have information on let's say the accepted manuscript for X journal, it wouldn't, sort of as you would expect, kind of report back like no information, or there wouldn't be a placeholder. It would just leave it blank. So oftentimes in the script, you'll see there are actually a lot of error handling having to do mostly not with Google API, with Sherpa Romeo, because if it came back and it didn't have an OAC data, it doesn't have a placeholder, like I said, so it would just return an error because it couldn't find that piece of data in the nested JSON. So that's all to say, if OpenAlex is easier to use, I'd love to check it out. So please let me know your own experience with OpenAlex.
We have another one here. What about providing the citations to ChatGPT and asking it to extract or list the journal names?
So that's essentially what's going on, but I don't know why I don't know if OpenAI has an API. When I had, like I said, right, the first stage of the process, I was trying to code for the different, what do you call it, formatting variations and creativity that I was finding in the CVs of faculty. And then I was annoyed by how many exceptions I was coding for. So I put it on ice, and then I heard about PaLM opening up and there being an API, and I was like, oh, that seems so interesting. Let me try that out. And I think now that I am thinking about it, I think I did try the API from OpenAI, but I just found the Google documentation to be a little bit easier to use. But the issue is that by copying and pasting it, this saves time from using something like ChatGPT and just using the model behind, right? Instead of using Gemini, I'm using the model behind it, so it does it automatically. And actually it's actually interesting because the time it takes to process like a full CV, like Natalie is a full professor and he has, I don't know, almost 60 articles at this time. It took about 5 minutes for the script to run to extract the journal name and then pass the journal name to Sherpa Romeo and then give me the open access report at the end. So it was actually a pretty intensive process, even though it's automated.
I think that's all. Hold on, we just got one in. Getting the source material from LLM-based medium is fine as long as you can verify its authenticity. I don't believe that was a question per se. So I think unless I missed someone, I think we've answered most of the chat questions in here
Okay, great.
with just a few minutes to spare.
Perfect. Well, okay, Douglas is OpenAI, yeah. Just going down here. Okay, yeah, so Douglas is saying OpenAI has an API. You need to pay per submitted token. That's wild. Okay, I know. Google PaLM is free for right now. All right, everyone. Well, I hope, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen. I'm happy to keep in touch. Feel free to send me a message or check out the repo. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. You're very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.